I have a friend who said that her dog ate her sermon. And she said, I don't think that that's what the prayer meant for inwardly digesting. I was raised to follow the rules, but also to defend myself. In 5th grade, a girl kept slapping me on the playground, and I told the teacher like my mom had told me to. But after the 3rd time, my dad called my older brother, who's 5.5 years older than me, into the living room and said, okay, Kendra, practice punching him in the stomach. That's what you're going to do next time. That did stop it. When my child was being bullied in 4th and 5th grade, his sibling and I were telling him things that he could do or say to curb and hopefully stop the bullying. He told us, violence is not the answer. I will not do or say any of those things. His sibling looked at me and said, he's a pacifist. Like it was the dirtiest word known. While I agree in theory with my pacifist child, my actions have not always been as faithful to that theory as his have. I do know, however, that God does not condone violence. There are biblical texts that seem to contradict that statement, but God does not condone violence. We all know that many people have used various texts from the Bible to condone violence. Fathers, husbands, wives, parents, protesters, organizations, popes, crusaders, and ministers. We are flawed. Those who condone violence using the Bible are wrong. We are called to be faithful to God and to our neighbors. We are called to be in right relationship with God and our neighbors, not to treat our neighbors as our neighbors treat us. We have so much going on around us in the world, in our nation, and in our state today. So many people using the Bible for their own ends, to hurt others, and advocate others being hurt. It's just not right. Jesus didn't exclude anyone, and certainly didn't ever hurt anyone. The people that Jesus spoke woes to regarding their behavior were actually the religious elite who did exclude and hurt people. Our passage in Judges is confounding, especially if we read the rest of it. Many of the stories in the book of Judges are confounding. It is one of the bloodiest and most concerning books of the Bible, in my opinion. At clergy conference in October, I was presented with a question that caused me, yet again, to look at it, reading and interpreting the Bible differently. The question pertained to Genesis 3, but it is applicable to many texts, especially those that confound us or that have a history of effects that are negative and even theologically inaccurate at the least. It was, what question was this text answering? When the story was told, when it was written down, what question was this text answering for the people of God? The Israelites were not faithful. The Israelites were positive that God called them to conquest and destruction. But God does not condone violence. The prophets tell them again and again and speak against the conquests and wars and against their daily living. But why were these stories written? What question were they answering? I don't think the question was, what war, conquest, or altercation did God call us into this year or this generation? I think the question was, how were we unfaithful and distrustful of God? What happened when we were? And what happened when we were faithful and trusted God? And just in case you're thinking that they won a war or a skirmish, I think the bigger issue is that there was peace for a generation, sometimes two. We all just want peace. How long, O Lord, how long? We are all concerned about violence. We may not all be concerned about the same violence, or we may not all be concerned about violence in the same way. We may not see the same solutions, especially politically, but I would imagine that we all want violence to end. All of us want people to stop getting shot. We all want wars to end. We all want sickness, dying, and suffering to end. We want all people to be safe, to exercise self-control, to be in right relationship with their neighbors, to settle differences diplomatically through discussion and without violence. Before Cain kills Abel in Genesis 4, God says to Cain, "Sin is lurking at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it." Cain doesn't. The Israelites don't. We don't. Caitlin, one of our college students, stood at the lectern last week and said that she had several parishioners reach out to her to check on her and her family who are Lebanese. She said that she felt loved and embraced by this community. We know Caitlin. Caitlin knows us. Her worry becomes our worry. Her family is our family. Relationship is what breaks down barriers, what creates bonds, what does not allow us to other and ostracize another person or group of people. Relationship is what we were made for, and being faithful to God and our neighbor is how we build and strengthen relationship. Poole, a theologian, said, "It is the genius of a wicked man to lay the blame of their miscarriages upon others, oftentimes upon God himself." Each of the stories in Judges starts with, "The Israelites did what was evil," or wicked, "in the sight of the Lord." Some of them say, "again," including the one that we read. But someone who trusted God always is able to lead the Israelites out of the mire they had sunken themselves into. But also notice the exchange in our gospel with the third slave. The slave tells the master that he buried the master's essentially $1 million, blames his lack of action on the master, and says that he was afraid of the master. The master then says, and I'm paraphrasing here, "Oh, really? It was my fault. Well, aren't you wicked and lazy? Get out of my life forever." I don't think that a lawyer or a psychologist would advise the master to go that route, but that is the story as we have it. Fear caused the third slave to bury what he was given. We can get into lots of semantics with this third slave, but from what we have in the story, the other two took what they were given and doubled it, and the master called them good and faithful. Thus, the third slave was not faithful. Snodgrass, a theologian who has a great book on the parables, says, "If the kingdom is about anything, it is about accountability to God." This parable calls us to commitment to the one who truly is king and to faithfulness to God's purposes. And I think the whole Bible calls us to commitment to the one who truly is king and to faithfulness in God's purposes. Violence is not God's purpose. Faithfulness to God and neighbors is. Reconciliation is. Forgiveness is. Relationship is. And while we may not be able to change the world tomorrow or this month as much as we would like to, our faithfulness to God's purposes will change the world slowly but exponentially if we all do it. Our faithfulness influences peace instead of violence in every form at every level. we can multiply our faithfulness to God instead of burying it out of fear. Fear for repercussions from those who think God's purposes can be used to condone or justify violence, or any kind of fear that we might have. Maybe we can embrace that being called pacifists isn't a dirty word, but allows us to be good and faithful in showing Christ's light and God's purposes to all the world.